It's Thursday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Hope you guys are having a great day out there today. Drizzly and not so nice. It sounds like it's going to be super cold for Halloween. That's not my favorite news to hear with 3 trick-or-treaters in the house, not including myself. But we'll get through it. This is what happens sometimes in late October. I'm no stranger to that. My birthday is actually the day before Halloween, and I'm always used to not knowing if it's going to be 60 or 30. It looks like it's going to be trending towards the lower number on this particular time of year. But a lot of the sports these days are at least indoors, including the Vikings, the Timberwolves. We'll talk about both of those teams here in just a little bit. Randy Johnson will join me from the Star Tribune to talk Gopher football. Big win over Iowa this past weekend, of course. Chilly game probably coming up this weekend against Michigan State, but a chance for them to get hot in the standings. You got Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, before you got to play out Ohio State and Wisconsin. But an opportunity here for them to redefine their season after, what we thought was trending towards a lost season. Amazing what one win can do. A win over a rival on the road gets them back into position where you start to think about a better bowl game and even start to maybe think about Big Ten West contention. But before we get ahead of ourselves, they need to win a couple more games at least before we start to think about those things. And they're going to need to get some help along the way as well. First, before we get to that though, what did I miss? Timberwolves opened with a 97-94 loss to Toronto on Wednesday night. It was supposed to be kind of the debut of the same Wolves, but the new Wolves, right? They've talked all offseason, all preseason about continuity, about how this is year 2 with a lot of these same players together. The Rudy Gobert trade last season, figuring out how he and Karl Anthony Towns play better together. Towns, of course, hurt for about 2/3 of the season a year ago. Didn't really get to see a full sample of those guys together, but they said, wait, listen, I know we're going to be up against it with the salary cap in a year. I know we've got, a lot of issues to sort out, especially on offense, but I think that we have a chance to be really good if we can kind of figure out some of these continuity issues. Head coach Chris Finch saying in the offseason that he wants their identity to be defense, but they still have a lot of capable offensive players, including their max guys, Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, leading the way. So if the biggest problem last season was offensive continuity and the offense looking quote unquote clunky or sticky, the ball getting sticky a lot of times, that was something we were all looking to see. How would that look differently in the opener against the Raptors? And guess what, folks? It didn't look any different at all. It was more of the same. I know it's just 1 of 82, but that was really, really disappointing if you were watching that game and thinking, okay, what are these changes? What have they done differently? What have they figured out or unlocked in the offseason that's going to make this offense function more freely, flow better? You've got a full year of Mike Conley. Everybody is healthy except for Jaden McDaniels, and he should be back soon. And he's not he's an important piece. He's more of a complementary player. He's paid like a star, but he's more of a complementary player right now, at least in the offense. He helps. He's got some chemistry, but he's not driving the engine of this team. That's more of a Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns enterprise. So all of those guys in there, and they still only managed 94 points in this game. Now, it's a game where you can look at it and say you can live with 94 points if it was the result of just flat out missing good shots. If you were moving the ball, if you were just getting wide open looks, but for some reason on night 1 of the NBA season, the shots just weren't falling, then you say, you know what? The process was good. The process was good. And this is a big kind of key point of this whole show. We'll get to that with the Vikings a little bit later too. The process was good, but we just didn't make shots, right? Because then you look at it and say, keep repeating the same thing. It's going to change. It's going to get better as time goes on. You're going to make those shots. It's going to look better once those shots start to fall. Trust the offense, trust what you're doing, and those shots eventually will fall. That was not the case in this game. They were missing a lot of contested, low percentage shots, and I think it started with Anthony Edwards. That was the biggest disappointment to me, was that after the game, Anthony Edwards talking about the things he needs to do better, which is good accountability, but it just didn't make any sense. Like, the things that he was saying didn't make any sense in the context of what we expect from him and his role in the offense. It started with me not moving the ball, talking about the bad offense. He was 8 of 27 on the night, including 4 of 20 from 2-point range. He said, I don't know what I was doing tonight, but I'll get back to it. We'll be all right. Yeah, I'm glad you're taking out accountability and ownership of it. Another quote from Ant. I feel like I just got carried away and fell out of our strategy and started taking crazy shots. Fatigue definitely kicked in. I blame myself. Fatigue, it's game 1 of the season. What does that even mean? How do you get away from a game plan in the middle of a game? Like, I get it. I get it that he wants to carry a certain load, but that's not an answer or an excuse that I want to hear from Anthony Edwards in year 4. If he is really going to take a step forward, you can't have an entire game like that that's a mental lapse, an entire game where you get out of what you're trying to do. You might have possessions like that. You might have, 2 or 3 moments like that in a game, maybe in every game, where you say, I shouldn't have done that. That was my fault. Took a bad shot, took a contested shot. You look at a shot chart from Wednesday night, it's full of unfilled circles, missed shots from mid-range, just contested, bad looks. Sometimes they go in. They were kind of going in a little bit more in the first quarter, which kind of let them get away with it, let them have bad process lead to good results. Mike Conley Jr. kind of called them out on that. Said, I think we had a little bit of early success with the ball being sticky. Guys were making some tough shots on our team, and it was working early. As the game goes on, we can't rely on it. We can't rely on that style of basketball. When that ball stuck, we had a few weird plays where we tried to get fouls, threw it off the glass. It's basically like a steal transition run out. That led to a lot of easy baskets for Toronto, let them build a little bit of a lead, and then Toronto hit some shots in the fourth quarter, and that is the ball game. Now, it's just 1 of 82. We talked yesterday about the patience needed in a 1 of 82 season. They did some things well. They rebounded a whole lot better than they did last season. Edwards had 14 rebounds to go with his, 27 points. So he had, he filled up the box score in different ways. So, not all hope was lost. But then again, you look at it and you say, is the rebounding going to be repeatable? Are they going to do those things well every game? See, it has to be this kind of consistent process along the way. Edwards had 26, not 27. Let me correct myself quickly. Not a huge difference, but 26, not 27 on 8 of 27 shooting. Like I said, Towns 8 of 25, including 2 of 10 from 3-point range. Gobert, Towns, and Edwards all had double-doubles, but it's kind of a hollow double-double, especially when you're getting plenty of offensive rebounds from your own misses, and you're just not getting those quality shots. So again, 1 of 82. Can they clean up the process quickly? Can they keep rebounding in a bigger way to kind of sustain the things they were doing well in this game? It's just disappointing because they talked all offseason. All the talk was, we've kind of figured out a way to kind of unlock this. It's going to be better on offense. We still want our identity built around defense, but we can be a better offensive team than we were last year. Maybe take a step to be top 5 in defense and upper half in offense, and that's probably going to translate into a high playoff seed and the chance to compete in the playoffs. What I saw on Wednesday was unfortunately more of the same. And if it's more of the same for too long this season, this whole thing is going to get blown up. This whole thing is going to get blown up. They're going to trade somebody because this log jam of players making a lot of money, if they're a 500 team or hovering around that mark, they're not going to stick with it. So I want to see improvement almost right away because the process is just as important as the results. They didn't have either one on Wednesday, but the process is so much more important right now, and that was definitely flawed in the opener. Quick note before we get to Randy Johnson, though, at least they weren't the Bulls. The Bulls had a player-only meeting after the first game of the season, a blowout loss. Can you believe that? Players only meeting after a loss to Oklahoma City, I believe. They're 0-1. One game, and they have to have a players only meeting. I don't know if I've ever seen that in the history of sports, to have a players only meeting after one game. But it's another team that kind of ran it back, that had a lot of issues last season, but decided to keep their core intact and hope for better things this year, kind of like the Wolves. They struggled in their opener, but I don't know if the Wolves are in players-only meeting territory yet, but we will stay tuned for that.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino. Let your story begin.
Let's talk Gopher football today with Randy Johnson of the Star Tribune. Randy, no secret what we're going to start with today. 12-10 win over Iowa. Changes the texture of this season considerably, gives PJ Fleck his first win over the Hawkeyes of his tenure, gives the Gophers their first win there in almost a quarter of a century. And obviously the controversy that came with it, the punt return for a touchdown that wasn't, and then the 12-10 hang on for the victory. What was it like to be a part of all of that down in Iowa City a few days ago?
Oh, it was stressful if you're sitting there on deadline and having to write everything, turn it around what you have for your story. But it was very interesting. It was when Cooper DeJean takes that punt back allegedly and scores. It's like, okay, just flash back to last year when Muhammad Ibrahim fumbled on the way, deep in the Iowa territory when it looked like the Gophers were to go ahead for good there. It's like, okay, you're thinking Iowa found another way to pull this thing out somehow. But then the replay ruling comes, and a lot of angry Iowegians after that. That's for sure.
Seemed like the Gophers weren't quite sure what happened in the moment. They weren't, of course, going to turn it down or turn their noses up at it. But then as the days went on, it seemed like they were more confident, and a lot of other people were more confident that the call was correctly applied about the invalid fair catch, even if it wasn't caught on the field. Yeah,
I think it's a rule that's probably not that well known. So, and the play was so exciting, especially for the home crowd, that here they go, they're gonna pull this thing out. But the right call was made when you look at how it's read, and it might be some might consider it kind of a ticky-tack call because did it affect the play at all? Well, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. It's a situation. I kind of wonder it was DeJean trying to basically bait the Gophers into, like, say, slowing down the play, and then he takes runs. I think that's why that rule is in there. So you can't pull that off where you kind of lull a team to sleep and then just take off with it. But when you look at by the letter of the law, that's what it was called correctly afterward. Missed on the field by the officials, though.
The rest of the game, they kick 4 field goals. They don't score a touchdown. And we thought that, some of the keys to the game were to be obviously limit mistakes, but also you've got to cash in and convert all of your golden opportunities into, at least some of them, into sevens. They didn't do that, and they still won the game. Is that as much to do with the Gophers' defense and approach, or as much to do with Iowa's complete offensive ineptitude?
Well, I think you got to look at it both ways. Each is a big part of it. The Gophers, especially after halftime, played very good defense. They forced 4 3-and-outs and got 2 second-half turnovers. And Iowa didn't move the ball. Iowa had 12 yards of offense in the second half. It was a situation where they put pressure on the quarterback and forced him into turnovers. He was not very mobile, Deacon Hill, and they made him pay for that. Iowa, he's their backup. He's not very good. He's got a pretty low completion percentage, around 37%. They took advantage of that. Not the first half, not so much, because they basically handed Iowa a touchdown with 4 defensive penalties on that drive. And, that was one where they had a lot of atoning to do, and they did in the second half.
I thought it was interesting. PJ Fleck, I think early in the year when they played a non-conference game, I can't remember if it was Eastern Michigan or Louisiana, whichever one of those teams has a pretty good quarterback, said, that quarterback could play for some of the teams in the Big Ten. And I flashed forward to Iowa and I was like, they probably would take that guy on their team.
Yeah, that was Louisiana.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the state of quarterback in the Big Ten in a lot of places is not very good right now. And a lot of guys. There's a few teams that are relying on backups or their second guy in there. Just if their original starter wasn't effective. So yeah, for every JG McCarthy, you've got two or three guys that they're struggling.
Now, I thought it was interesting. They beat him 12-10 with 4 field goals, the last of them coming in the fourth quarter, and they, essentially played what we could call the long game. And PJ Fleck referred to that and said he had a conversation with Brett Bielema. I don't know if it was this past summer or the summer before, but the Illinois coach basically telling him that's how you have to beat him. And I think Illinois beat them in 2022. Bielema beat Iowa, I think 3 out of 5 times when he was Wisconsin's head coach. Different teams then, but still a lot of the same principles under Ferentz. Do we think that's really the best way to beat them? It seems like it's a risky way to beat them, but that it worked in this case. And I also thought it was interesting that Bielema is giving Fleck secrets on beating Iowa.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there. I think part of it too. You play Iowa. You don't want to make mistakes because they are so good at on defense and capitalizing on mistakes. Be it Riley Moss last year. You got Cooper Gene this year. Basically, they got guys who can take it back. I think the big key for the Gophers this year, they stopped any of the Iowa big plays. Iowa did not get a big gain or an explosive play on offense. And that's where a team has to be very patient. That's where the long game comes in Fleck's words. It's sure. They were able to avoid, they kind of shot themselves in the foot toward the end of the first half with those defensive penalties. But aside from that, they were very solid. You saw contributions from a lot of different players, and linebacker play was so much better. The pass rush was very good. And then Tyler Newman had an outstanding game in the secondary, and Justin Wally gets the pick at the end to seal it.
They came out of the game with some injuries at running back. I mean, they came in with some question marks there, but how do they look health-wise? Where do you think the depth chart is going to be coming into the game against Michigan State on Saturday?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, last week they found out before the game that was announced that Bryce Williams out for the season because of injury.
Right.
But Darius Taylor was back and available. And then Zach Evans, both of those guys carried most of the load. Evans goes out just before halftime. Then Taylor gets hurt early in the fourth quarter. That leaves it up to Sean Tyler, the Western Michigan transfer. PJ didn't specifically address the injuries to the running backs, though he did hint that he felt that they got some good news and they might have one of the 2 injured guys back. So this week, you'll see Sean Tyler. You'll probably see Jordan Newman, Tyler's younger brother and converted running back from defensive back. If you get, say, either a Taylor or an Evans, that would be a big help. But yeah, it's they're using all their depth they can right there. And 2 years ago they were able to bring over Derek LeCaptain from linebacker. Mariano Sori-Marin dubbed him the running backer. Well, he's not an option this year. He had a season-ending injury in training camp. So yeah, they're a bit thin there.
Now, you might not need everybody at full strength to beat Michigan State. They've been struggling all year. But if you are going to play the long game of this season, if we might borrow that phrase, you are going to need to win pretty much every other game the rest of the season, maybe except for the Ohio State game, to have any chance of contending for a Big Ten title. How do you think that plays into kind of the conversation of, okay, you got Michigan State, you got Illinois, Purdue, all of those winnable games. You got to beat Bielema, play the long game against him. How do you think that factors into, okay, winning these games versus kind of like making sure that you're winning, but also healthy for kind of that push at the end to see if you can beat a Wisconsin and maybe sneak in the back door and actually win a Big Ten West title?
Yeah, you would want to you want to get the passing game going better than it has. That would take a lot of pressure off the run game, and then not so much wear and tear on the running backs. They're running the ball 64% of the time this season. You'd like to see more of the passing game come in here and take that part of the load. You saw a better version of Ethan Kaliak-Manis in the second half. He was the victim of a lot of drop passes too. I believe about 6 of them. So they need the receivers to hang on quite a bit better. They're basically they need to be more balanced going forward. And yeah, they have a path. There is a path there to contend and possibly win the Big Ten West. If you win all 5 of the remaining games, you win it. Well, you got Ohio State in there, so that's very tough hill to climb there. You go 4-1 with Ohio State as a loss, and beat Wisconsin. At the end, you got a pretty good shot if Iowa absorbs another loss. You want to. They can get into a situation if they beat Wisconsin where they would have tiebreakers over Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska should it come to that. So that would be where they'd want to be. You'll need the one that they would want to avoid being a tiebreaker is with Northwestern, but I'm guessing the Wildcats are going to absorb another loss or two down the stretch here. It's there is a way to get to the Big Ten West title at 6-3 in the conference, and if you play it even further, there are ways to get there at 5-4, but I don't think you want to try to test that. Their best way is get those 4 wins, and somehow you beat Ohio State. That'd be even better, but that's probably not going to happen.
After seeing them on Saturday and then also seeing Iowa on Saturday, how confident are you that they could get those 4 wins, and B, even against a soft schedule that Iowa has, how confident are you that Iowa would take another loss somewhere in there?
I would say Iowa will take another loss in there. They don't they have not much of an offense, and that it came back to bite them this week. And I think there are better offenses than the Gophers that they'll be playing. They have Rutgers on the schedule. Rutgers is a decent team this year. They're sitting at 5-2 or 6-2 now. They still have to play Nebraska. And Nebraska's come around. They're a much more competitive team this year than they were last. The Gophers. As for the Gophers, it's tough to project 4 wins out of those 5 just because there's the thing that's kind of hung over them all year was that loss at Northwestern when you blew a 21-point fourth quarter lead. That said, I think this team has improved since then, especially what we saw this past weekend on defense.
Final thing, they were 1-0 in the Iowa championship season, although I think they celebrated a little bit more than just a regular game. I think maybe the 1-0 in that season is to keep them focused, not so much to keep them from celebrating. Given where they were, given what they did, how should we kind of project this Michigan State game?
It becomes a pretty important game now that they've got themselves back in the race. Michigan State's gone through a similar situation that Northwestern has, a big scandal, coach forced out, but they've lost 5 in a row. They've been competitive at times. And they always have some good athletes. I think, the Gophers have to take care of business. They just have to be solid in all facets of the game. Don't turn the ball over, things like that. They played a pretty clean game for the most part against Iowa. Didn't get in the end zone, but didn't make bad mistakes that sunk them.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they can keep it going. Like I said, just a different narrative now with both the Gophers and the Vikings. Just kind of one game changes how we think about both of these teams. All of a sudden, we're talking about playoffs for the Vikings, and certainly bowl projections become a lot easier for the Gophers. And even, like you said, a path to the Big Ten title if they can keep winning. Got to start with Michigan State, but then, Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, all of those are pretty winnable games. Like, not saying they will win them, but they should be favored in at least 2 of those, right? And maybe the Purdue game as well.
Yeah, I would think so. Especially if they win these next 2. They go into Purdue on a 3-game winning streak. They would be favored. They haven't had the most success there, but they've won there too. It's just a matter of, are they good enough to get where they want to be? That's to be determined. They're riding pretty high right now after the win. They've got to be pretty happy. But there's a lot of more work to do before they can get where they need to be.
Well, I hope Saturday's game for fans' sake is as thrilling as Saturday's win over Iowa was, but I hope for your sake it's a little bit more paint by numbers and you can kind of wrap it up by the end of the third quarter and feel like you've got a story to write that's going to hold up for all editions, Randy.
Well, this year I knew going in, I thought there'd be a lot of close games, and that has been the case. And some have gone not the way you want them to, but it's just part of it's an occupational hazard.
Yes,
on the
it is. Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. Talk to you next week. I always appreciate Randy coming on here and sharing his Gopher football knowledge. I think, like we talked about, it's an opportunity for the Gophers, but also a challenge. I think the biggest thing we need to see is more improvement from their quarterback, Ethan Kaliakmanis. What do they have in him? Can he lead them down the stretch here? Can he lead them to a good season, keep that momentum going from past years? Can he show that he is the guy for future seasons? PJ Fleck's teams tend to get better as the season goes along. If this is another case of that, and they can string together a bunch of wins at the rest, down the rest of the stretch here, then we'll be able to have more confidence in this process going forward. But I think these next 5 games are awfully important for them. I think this is a team that is kind of on the precipice because the season can go one way or the other. They had a good win in Iowa where they trusted their process. Can they do that against Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, teams they probably should beat, probably will be favored against? I know they're favored against Michigan State. That's probably the easiest of the bunch, but can they put themselves in the spot where they can think about contending for a Big Ten West title, even if they don't beat Ohio State, which is a long shot, set themselves up for that finale against Wisconsin with a chance to have something to play for on the line? That is what I want to see the rest of the season. Let us finish with the cooler, the Vikings. Speaking of process versus results, circling back to the Wolves and the start of the show, Kirk Cousins on Wednesday. I was out there at Vikings Access period, open locker room. We recorded another Access Vikings podcast. Give that a listen. That went live yesterday. We'll have our mailbag episode going live on Friday, so listen to that. But Kirk Cousins is interesting, talking about how he has a hard time enjoying a play where the result was good, but the process was maybe bad. And he kind of took us through the touchdown to Jordan Addison at the end of the first half. I want you to listen back to kind of his thoughts on that from that period on Wednesday.
I hate watching plays that go our way, but I felt like we were fortunate because I don't feel like we were good enough, if you will. And so I watch it and say, we got away with one. I don't even like celebrating. It's a weird dynamic where I'm like, we need to feel like we executed the play and earned it. And certainly Jordan did in the sense that he made a play. But from my standpoint and what I can control, I'm saying I got to be better. I got to have a better feel for where to lead him, and got away with one. You obviously have had a few that you haven't gotten away with where you kind of paid the price the other way, where the ball bounced the other way. So it always balances out. But there is some level of, we got to be better, and we got away with one, and I don't love living like that for too long because I don't feel like it's sustainable. I feel like you have to ultimately, earn it.
Now, that was particularly interesting to me because when I watched the game back and I saw that play, we watched that play over and over again because it was such a highlight from the game. But if you watch him going to the sidelines after that play, he is not smiling. He's accepting the high fives, but you can see him, I believe, kind of processing what just happened, mad at himself for the way he threw that ball. I'm sure happy, and at the bottom line, of course, they scored a touchdown. You're not going to be unhappy with the bottom line, but unhappy with the process, unhappy with the result that got him there, because he knows that probably 7 or 8 times out of 10, that is going to be an interception. Maybe one of the other times it's going to be an incompletion. And he just happened to find the time with that throw where that play in that moment was a touchdown instead of one of those other negative outcomes. So definitely a pivot point in that game. Some luck for the Vikings, which they hadn't really been getting all season long. And in a moment for Kirk Cousins, it was a teachable moment for him, but also an insight into his process and how he thinks about kind of, the things that he's doing and not being able to really enjoy something unless it is executed properly versus just having the outcome be what he wants. 49ers head coach, I thought this was interesting, by the way. 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan had a different take on that play. He was talking to reporters on Wednesday. He said he was asked about defensive coordinator Steve Wilks, who had a cover zero blitz called on that play, and he disagreed with it. He said, here was his quote from Wednesday, kind of thinking back on that play. He said, he knows he messed up on that call. I have no problem with zero blitzes, especially when you need a lot of yards. If you need to get 20 yards to kick a field goal, I have no problem with the zero blitz, but I do when there's 16 seconds left. That's where he lost track. There was no necessary need for that just because of the time. I have no problem with that play call, but when it's that time, you can't do that. And yes, we all kind of question that in the moment, and Kyle Shanahan definitely taking a second guess at it. You don't usually hear such a sharp rebuke or such a lengthy critique of something a defensive coordinator does, but obviously that was a huge moment in the game. It was a weird call. I mean, the Vikings didn't have any timeouts left. They're at their own 40. They need to go at least 20 to 25 yards just to get into field goal range. And it's dicey, even if you're going to get a completion over the middle and spike it at that point. You're probably better off just playing coverage and trying to keep the Vikings in bounds and end the half. Instead, they burn him for a 60-yard touchdown. A better throw would have had even a better chance of a touchdown, but they get it anyway. So that piece of interesting too, just hearing the process on both sides, the results on both sides, and how that impacts a game in any sport. That will do it for today. Lavelle Lee Neal expected to join me on Friday's show, probably talking some baseball, some World Series, maybe a little bit of Twins offseason stuff. Might pick his brain on a few other things as well. Always fun to have him on, so listen for that on Friday. Until then, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again tomorrow.